Hi there, it's another great day for a ClueCon weekly recording, and hopping into the ClueCon weekly podcast studio with me this time round is Greg Plum. Hey Greg, how are you doing
David,
today?
how good, thanks. How are you?
Very, very well. Very pleased indeed to have you along, and nice to see you joining us from Delaware, I believe.
Correct, absolutely. I would say sunny Delaware, but not today.
Okay, I'm sure it is sunny Delaware sometimes.
Sometimes, sometimes it is, just not today. Exactly.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in to join us. Our mission here on ClueCon Weekly is to round up the interesting people in the world of communications and get them talking about interesting things here in the studio. And today is going to be no exception. I know that for sure.
No
And
pressure.
what I like to do is, in order to get the audience understanding where you're coming from and getting to know a little bit more about you, Greg, I wonder if you could, well, first of all, tell us what you're up to right this minute. But then before you go into too much detail, we'll work backwards and find out how you came to be doing that. So what is your current role, Greg?
Absolutely. So right now, my role is channel chief for a company called Mobile Solutions. It is a managed mobility provider that's based in Centennial, Colorado. So my
Okay.
day-to-day is working with channel partners to really explain the benefits and of managed mobility, and we'll get into that. I'm sure what that means, and just how to really help them grow their business and increase their product offerings into their customer base.
Great, great. Yeah, managed mobility is one of those phrases that's easy to say, but will require a little bit of explanation. So we'll come back to that before too long. But
Absolutely.
take us back, Greg, and tell us what you've been doing in the past, because I think you mentioned that you've spoken at a ClueCon before, which is excellent. So if you can build that into your story as well about how you came to be doing that and what you would have been talking about at the time, that would be very useful for us.
Sure, absolutely. So thanks for the opportunity. So I started actually. It's so funny because you think you set your path, but the path never takes the route that you think it's going to take, and mine is certainly no exception. Believe it or not, David, in college I was a geophysics major of all things. So I was actually first in my class, and I was last in my class. I was in a class of one in geophysics back in the early 90s, and
Right.
I ended up right out of school. I actually ended up in a corporate role, working for a large bank, and I kind of got the golden handcuffs on. And then at that point, I stuck around and I stayed there for 10 years. So I never even really got to officially practice my what I was educated in geophysics.
Mm.
But then, after 10 years in finance, I took a bit of a leap, and I got into communications. So, and actually at the time conferencing, audio conferencing strictly. Believe it or not, there was a time when somebody would
Mm.
pay per minute to dial into a conference bridge just for straight audio. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but it wasn't that
Absolutely.
long
Well,
ago.
of course, some people still do, Greg, don't they? Via some premium. I'm sure they must be in the very small minority now, but via premium rate numbers or paid platforms or whatever it might be, I'm sure there are
Or
still the odd people.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then the operator assistance, because there's certain things that those providers, those boutique service providers offer that, for large board meetings, and investor calls, you have to have that hand holding. So yes, it's not quite as prevalent, but yes, there's certainly a subset of that. So it's funny, when I took that job, was given that opportunity. Was hired as the first salesperson for the company. It was called the Conference Group, located in Delaware. I was brought in because a friend was working there. That's how everything happens in the industry. It's not from a job board. It's because somebody knew me, I knew them, and they said, "Hey, you want to give it a shot?" I was given an opportunity and fell in love with technology at that point, and just being kind of more on the front edge of making the change and helping contribute to the technology, as opposed to just being a consumer of the technology. And then, I remember saying to my wife, she said, "What?" I mean, at that point, David, I had never even been on a conference call. And that was what I joined a company. That's what we did. So, because conferencing was really on the front end, it was in the early stages back then. I remember telling my wife, I'll give it 6 months and we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, I'll go back to banking. Well, I stayed in that particular role for 12 years. A big reason is because I discovered this thing called the channel. I'll never forget the day a friend of mine or an acquaintance, a colleague said to me, your service, you should probably take that to the channel and to agents and have them sell this for you. Well, my eyes lit up because when I realized that there was an entity out there that would sell my product for me,
Mm.
And I wasn't paying for it. There's no salary involved. It's a commission structure. It just made perfect sense. So honestly, I think it was maybe 3 months later, I found myself along with the owners of the company in New Orleans at our first channel event. And over the next 15 years, I attended that same event 2 times a year, with the very few exception, to build and get to know what the channel was all about, which is where I remain today. So I've made a few jumps through the years. Almost all of them were channel focused. Another, you might know freeconferencecall.com. I don't know if you know that brand or not, but I'm sure your audience will. Very, very, yeah. It's the largest privately held conferencing company on the planet. And for a while there, I was working to build out a channel for them as well. So basically, hop, skip, and a jump, it got me into communications. It got me into unified communications. So from just collaboration and conferencing, went into UC, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with that, with what the value of UC. And then when I spoke at the last ClueCon, it was right around that time where, honestly, I'm not sure if I was working for an Australian cloud communications company at one point, where we were voice enabling Skype for Business and Office 365. And then there was another offshoot of that. I was actually on my own. I had a company called Plum UC, Plum Unified Communications, where I was really a consultant coming in, offering. I was almost like an agent, just bringing in the optimal solution depending on what the customers needed. And a lot of what I did was still with partners, just because that's my mindset. It's not a transactional sale. It's much more of a relationship sale. So fast forward to today, I ended up, one of those relationships I made through the years was the president of Mobile Solutions. He said, hey, would you like to come join me, help grow this thing? And that's where I've been for the last, 120 days.
Okay,
so brand spanking new.
I'm looking forward to hearing a bit about that. But before we move to it, you've been in the channel a long time. And I know for a fact that if somebody creates some great technology, one of their biggest challenges is going to be getting it out to the market. And of course, that's exactly what the channel is there to do. There is no kind of faster way of getting your product out to the market, providing, of course, it's a channel friendly product and you can put the right proposition together. But can you give, if somebody's watching this and perhaps they've not really come across the concept of the channel, can you give us a little overview of that first before we move into the technical side of what Mobile Solutions does?
Absolutely. So channel is actually, it's an indirect sales strategy. So instead of selling direct, are you seeing me okay? I know I've got a little bit of pixelation. You got me okay?
I've got you okay now. Yeah, you did sort of crumple up a little bit, but you're looking great now, Greg.
All right, great. So, being an indirect sales method or strategy, you obviously you don't have as much control. If you have your own internal sales force, it's very easy to set your expectations and put KPIs in place to manage to that. When you're working through a channel, it's not quite so simple, because it becomes more of a game of mind share. We work through entities known as, some of the audience may know this, master agencies. So some of the bigger brands that they might know out there are Intelisys, Avant, Telarus, Planet One, TBI. So these are companies that actually are aggregators of services. So they pull in services like mine and then perhaps hundreds of others, and they bring them to their channel of agents who they've also aggregated. They sit in the middle and they help really, they're almost like traffic cops, but they add value in that they oftentimes have engineers themselves to help identify optimal solutions. So essentially, when we're selling through those channels, again, it's about evangelism. It's about creating the optimal solution and trying to get them to pay attention to you and give them reason to pay attention. The beauty for us as a provider, anybody who's selling to the channel, is it is variable cost structure. So there's no salaries involved other than your management team, but you don't pay until the sale is made. The challenge, though, David, is really around getting focus, buying for that mind share, And it takes time. You know, if you have a sales force, you can get them up and running in weeks. If you have a channel, just because of the struggles going on with all the noise in the industry and other and competitors, you're oftentimes looking at, you know, a ramp is more like 18 months. So it takes time.
Indeed. But looking from the vendor or the manufacturer's point of view, that's because there is going to be a lot of value. And so what are the advantages to the vendor of using the channel model?
Well, it's really about scale. It's about leveraging your resources and scale because, again, it's variable cost structure. So you don't have to have large salaries. And let's face it, good salespeople are not inexpensive. So the advantage there is you're able to, with a few people on your channel team, able to leverage those resources and really support hundreds, I'll say hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of partners that are out in the field. To really take your product to their into their customers. The other advantage is this: a direct sales force is typically, think how they sell. They're usually, especially today, they're selling by phone. It's much more transactional. So when you're making those outbound efforts, it's largely trying to get in touch with people and then educating them cold. When you work through a channel, they are oftentimes known as a trusted advisor, or they're already in with that company. That company may have worked with them for a decade, so they're going to trust the solutions that are presented. That, for us, is an advantage because I'm not having to convince the end user of the value of my service. The person that they know is bringing us into the equation. So it's a fast track to get us into the decision makers.
Absolutely, and of course, there's the kind of the incidental or the kind of cross sales as well, isn't there? Where maybe that trusted advisor has been called in to talk about X, but the conversation wanders into Y, and you've got a solution for Y, and you know, the magic happens there.
Always, and it's about giving them. It's really arming your indirect sales force with the right questions, just to identify. So when they're sitting in front of the CIO, and that CIO says something about mobility or mobile device management, or containerization and working with in a hybrid environment with BYOD devices, if I've done my job, that partner thinks instantly mobile solutions, and that's the challenge.
Right. Okay. And now, again, I keep saying this, but before we get to what Mobile Solutions does, I want you to explain it from the other way around. So when you're the consumer, the purchaser, what advantages are there for you in talking to a channel partner rather than trying to go directly to a technology vendor?
Oh my goodness. Well, they are oftentimes agnostic, right? They're going to support multiple solutions. So if you're talking directly to let's say you're talking directly to me as a salesperson for mobile solutions, clearly I'm biased. If you're you're talking to a partner, they have in their arsenal multiple solutions. So when they're an effective partner, has their own discovery process. They're walking through the questions and they're identifying the needs of that particular end user. And at that point, they're starting to think, okay, which solutions might be the best fit? That's why for us, it makes perfect sense because I'm not spending resources and time and energy on a prospect that really doesn't need what I have to offer. That vetting has already happened at the partner level. So for a consumer, there's the value in working with the agent. They're really not even paying. They're not paying more for that service. I'm paying the partner. The customer is not paying the partner. So it makes every sense to actually work with an advisor in that particular case.
Great. And of course, you know, something that we've not mentioned, but is inherently part of it, the support part of the equation is also provided by that channel partner in a lot of cases. And so that takes some weight off the vendor and of course means that the end users can have a closer relationship with the local channel partner than they would have done perhaps with a vendor. So lots of value looking both ways. Okay, great. Well, thank you for explaining some of that to us, Greg. So moving on to now Mobile Solutions. What is it you guys do?
Who? I'm just kidding. So Mobile Solutions is a managed mobility provider. So, and I said that earlier, and yeah, that is a mouthful, and it probably means 10 things to 10 different people. So essentially, we break it up into three pillars of support and of services. The first being optimize. Think your classic mobile expense management. They may work with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. They have these different environments. They have a myriad of different scenarios and devices that are deployed out in the field, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of devices. What we do when the optimize side is we help them. We don't make them change anything on their end. We just take a look at the way they are consuming their plans, and we optimize. We come up with recommendations and suggestions, and we actually implement on their behalf, often to the point of where our service pays for itself and then some. I mean, and when you get into enterprise, you're talking significant savings. We have one right now we're speaking with. It is a global entity, and we're looking at annualized. They will walk away with a savings of $500,000. That's without doing a rip and replace. We're not changing anything that they do. We're just optimizing what they have in place and their contracts that they have in place. So that's the one pillar. Second pillar is around security. Big topic these days. It's hard to go anywhere without hearing about security, and this is out at the endpoint. So some of the services that you all might be familiar with are VMware, AirWatch, Microsoft Intune for sure, and I believe Microsoft's changing that to Endpoint Manager. There is IBM Mass 360. So these are just a couple. Mobile Iron. So these are tools that are deployed to secure, lock down a device at the endpoint on the device itself, actually allowing some of these devices to be hybrid. So you can have a personal device. So for example, my phone, when I joined the company, I have my own personal iPhone. We were able to use our MDM solution, mobile device management solution, push out to my device, and now I have a locked down environment where there's no commingling of personal data and corporate data.
That's
from a security standpoint.
Yeah, an interesting point. I was going to move on to the bring your own device, because all of the things that you said make a great deal of sense. And of course, it's easier to implement if it's a lockdown estate of devices that are all on that central register. But the preponderance now is when you join a company, you don't really want to have, a device foisted upon you that might not suit your needs. You like your own device. And so that must be an extra part of the challenge, mustn't it?
Well, the tools are built specifically for that, to be able to lock them down. And, when that person leaves the company, you can just as easily as you gave them access, you can revoke that access. So it's that meeting that challenge is actually inherent to the tools themselves. So
right. And what it doesn't do. Sorry, Greg, I spoke over you because we got a little bit of a delay. But what I was going to ask is, what it doesn't do is impinge on their ability to use the device just as they were before they joined the company.
Absolutely. That's correct.
Great. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. You were going through the pillars.
Not at all. Yes. And the final pillar is manage. So think about the old school, the logistics around having phones deployed. So as simple as putting a screen protector on, getting their chargers, boxing them up, sending them out to the end customer, maybe putting whatever apps that they want to have loaded onto the machine, onto that device, sending them out. So that's on the front end. And then there's the back end logistics, which is around device reclamation. So at the end of the life cycle, getting that device back in-house, assessing it. Is it okay? Does it pass all the checks? Can we put it back on the shelf for redeployment, or do we recycle it and recoup some of that investment for the customer? So all those things together really encompass managed mobility. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, indeed. And I'd like to come on in a moment to how that might interplay with the world of the ClueCon weekly audience in some of the unified communication stuff they're doing. But before we do that, I had another question, and that is, I'm assuming that the value that you bring kicks in at a certain sort of base level, a floor of users, because it's probably not going to work for the small office with 3 users.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, 100 devices is the minimum where it becomes viable, really needed and viable for them to do that, to take advantage of our type of service. So it's a good point. Appreciate you bringing that up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because when you're up to 100 devices, you're running the risk of spending too much time focusing on the faffing about with this stuff rather than getting on with whatever your core business is, I guess.
Exactly right. Correct.
Great, great. Okay, yes. So you've spoken at a ClueCon. You know, a lot of our folks are developers, or they're involved in value-added reselling and that kind of stuff. Where do you see the sort of crossover, the interplay between the managed mobile device solution and what they're up to?
Well, I think it's hard to really escape. I think security, honestly, is probably that cross section where their interest and focus might intersect with what we're doing. And the interesting point is we don't, those tools I mentioned before, Intune, Mass 360, Mobile Iron, they're not our services, right? They're deployed by other companies. What we do is we support them. We help with the design, build, implement, and ongoing support. So the developer audience, security is always a piece of it. So if they're focused on UC, I know that security is built in, integrated to some degree. So I would imagine, can you tell me, David, I would imagine there's going to be a subset of the audience that is intimately familiar with Azure and the Microsoft stack.
Quite possibly, indeed, working in .NET environments and within Azure.
Exactly. Well, we feel strongly that that is one of the ecosystems that really has a life unto itself. I mean, anything Microsoft touches, obviously, it's an unprecedented distribution model. So with Intune, which is their MDM, it's integrated MDM at certain levels of licensure that's available. I know it's at E5, and I think the MS 365, the Microsoft 365 SKUs actually include Intune. So that is your device management. The challenge here for the end users, the partners that are supporting them, is really getting the adoption. So optimizing that tool for the environment, enhancing the adoption for two reasons. Number one, it's going to be, frankly, it's going to be a stickier customer. The more services that they have that they're actually taking advantage of, the value increases. Microsoft is going to love the same thing because you're increasing their adoption, of Intune. So basically, it's kind of a symbiotic type thing where everybody, by giving it that attention, the professional services attention that the Microsoft partner, certainly the developer, does not have an interest in. It's just really outside their sweet spot. But even a technology partner, a managed services provider that's going to be offering many different things, they may not have the time, energy, or interest in really investing in the becoming an expert specifically in mobile device management. And then actually, I should mention, might be of interest, David, MDM, there's an evolution going on. And what we're doing is we're trying to really elevate that conversation from one of just, the basics, but starting to think about UEM is the newest term out there. So it's Unified Endpoint Management. That's where you're now layering on top laptops. So out in the field, everybody's remote. We have no choice but to be remote today, unfortunately. So you've got your smartphones, your tablets, and your laptops. All of them are managed through that environment, and that's where unified endpoint management has come into vogue as really where people are starting to focus their energy and efforts.
Yeah, and of course, in our world, any one of those, or maybe all three, could be a SIP endpoint on a corporate unified communication system. Well, especially with
Absolutely.
Teams, inherently with Teams, actually.
Absolutely. So that's where I see where the services that we might be bringing to the table might be a little bit different. They're certainly complementary, and they're operating in the same exact ecosystem. So to have at least be cognizant of what the other capabilities are by the other services that can be plugged in, I think is really pretty important.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for explaining that to us, Greg. We're coming towards the end of our time together. But is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we say goodbye?
Yeah, it's one real quick one. This is kind of a big one. We ended up we're part of a private equity firm holds our company, and last week there was another acquisition. So interestingly, it kind of takes our big conversation from being managed mobility, which we're still fully involved in and engrossed in. There's actually now the other company that we've just acquired, or it's a sister company of Mobile Solutions, is called Mobicord, and they are based out of Utah. And essentially, it's more around total IT asset management. So your audience might enjoy this because it's not just mobility; it's mobility. So it's wireless, fixed, and also cloud. So in an environment that might have Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud in various forms, that single pane of glass can give full visibility across the entire IT asset ecosystem. And now that's definitely, and that's actually built on the ServiceNow platform. So it's more of an enterprise play. We play in enterprise with mobile solutions, but this one is specifically focused on the enterprise solution. So that's really new as of last week, and it's super exciting. And our footprint went from North America to global pretty much overnight. So we're really excited about that as well.
Got a somewhat larger total addressable market there then, Greg, to be
a little bit
getting out there in front of. Okay, well, look, Greg, thank you very, very much for coming in. Always appreciate people bringing their industry experience in and telling us about it. So thanks for joining us, and I hope we get to see each other at some stage further down the line, maybe at another ClueCon. Who knows?
I love it, David. Thanks for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.
All right, take care. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Cheers.